everybody, and welcome to your Thursday night installment of SPTV Live. And I'm joined once again by the esteemed Mark Fisher. How are you doing, Mark? Thanks for joining me.
I'm great, Alex. How you doing? I mean, I love that opening every time I hear
it. It's just a little bit of fun. It was really good fun to make, and I'll probably change it up at some point. But we are Power Thetans. That's what we're doing, right?
That's right.
So before we kick off, I am still a little bit ill, so please excuse me if I'm coughing a fair bit. I'll try and mute the mic when I do that. But for those of you watching, hello, Albin2 in the chat. Please, I've got links in the description to Mark's 2 channels. Our Scientology Stories, Peeling the Onion, and then you've got the Las Vegas travel channel as well, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Go and give Mark some love and subscribe to his 2 channels. This is a part 2. So a couple of weeks ago before Christmas, we did a part 1 where we talked about your story, how you got into Scientology, what life was like working in Scientology. So this is a follow-up, a part 2 to that. So if you haven't watched part 1, go and watch that. I don't think you're not going to be at a loss with what we're talking about today. You don't have to have seen the first one, but if you want to kind of get the pre-story, go and watch that after this or whatever. But today we're going to be talking about, because we finished last time when you left Scientology, so a little bit of a recap. If I remember rightly, your wife was on the RPF, and then you wanted to go and be with her on the RPF, so you unauthorized departure was a known blow in Scientology, and David Miscavige is on to you. So instead of putting you on the RPF so you could be with your wife, he promoted you to what was it, Deputy D Weeder.
Right, that's right. Deputy D Weeder, never to be D Weeder in charge.
Jeez. And then eventually you ended up leaving, and it was quite a traumatic story. I remember you saying about how you had to, you kind of put your foot down and said, hey, give me my stuff back. I'll be there with the police. And you wrote your wife a check for half of the money in your bank account, and kind of moved on. And we kind of left off at that point. So you just got out. Janice Gilliam Grady, who you do your channel, Our Scientology Stories, Peeling the Onion with, left at the same time, coincidentally. And you alluded to the fact that you met up with her and started a business. So I think that's maybe a good starting point of the day you left Scientology. Just talk me through that process. You've given your stuff back, you signed the check to your wife. Where are you at in your head? How are you feeling? What did you do?
Well, the first thing I did was I had a car. So, my wife goes, well, I want the car. And I said, well, I need the car. I'm leaving, so here it's all my money. So I gave her half the bank account, and I said, you keep all the furniture and all their other stuff. And I just took my clothes, and they took me from there to a storage unit where on one of the apartment units where we were living in Hemet, California. And Gary Jackson Moorhead came out. He was the security guard, and basically went through all of my stuff that I was going to take. And I was not allowed to take anything with Scientology or Sea Organization on it or anything like that. I snuck out a couple of things, papers that I have, like my SP declared. Well, I didn't have the SP declared, but the issue that canceled all of my certificates in Scientology, I snuck that out. I snuck a couple other things. And, but they took all my photographs. The only photographs that you see on my channel from me are the ones that I happen to send to my mother or my relatives, like for my wedding and things like that. But they took all of that stuff, and then I got in my car, and I drove off. I headed towards the Pacific Coast Highway along PCH1, which runs from San Diego all the way up to Washington State along the coast. And so that's what I did. I drove up the Pacific Coast Highway. I stayed in motels. I had some money, so I had no problems with that. And I drove up to Monterey, and I drove up to San Francisco, and I did a big loop. I went around all the way up the West Coast. Then I cut across to Lake Tahoe, and in Nevada, California. And then I drove down to Las Vegas. Okay. And at the time, I just was driving to Las Vegas. I had no idea that, I would have a future life there or anything like that. And I stayed a couple of days in Las Vegas. And then at that point, I was like, I don't know where I'm going to go. My mother was not a Scientologist. She lived on the East Coast. My father was a declared SP, and I still felt like I was a Scientologist, so I couldn't contact him. So the only thing I could do was go to my ex-wife's family, her father and stepmother down in San Diego. And my wife had asked me, don't contact my family, please, because she didn't want them causing trouble for her. But I had no choice. So I went down to San Diego. I knocked on their door and they took me in, and basically I stayed with them for a few weeks and helped me, get back on my feet.
And this was all, I think, also like time frame wise, just to give people a bit of background. This is obviously before the Aftermath Foundation existed. There, right now, there's now a really good support network in place for people leaving Scientology. But when you left, that wasn't really a thing. This was what sort
There
of
was
year would
nothing.
this have been?
It was September 1990. I left September
Right.
15th, 1990. So that's what now 34 years, almost 34 years ago that I left. Yeah.
Mm.
And I went to
And
San Diego.
And so what was that? It must have been quite daunting for you facing that prospect of, not having anywhere to go, and, things like the internet would have existed, but in its very early
No,
stages. So it's not like
there was nothing.
you couldn't have just, gone on a website or Facebook and, texted a friend or whatever. Like, this is all pre that stuff. So, it must have been quite daunting. Like, how did you feel figuring out this whole, this what's going to happen in the future? Because I if it was me, I would be terrified.
Yeah, well, and there were no cell phones, no nothing. I literally was on my own. So what I did was, the first thing I did was I had some money, so I went, and I had credit cards too, which most Sea Org members did not have that. But because I worked for Miscavige, I was able to accumulate credit cards, and I had no idea, but I had about $40,000 of available credit on all these various credit cards that I had amassed. Because when we were in the Sea Organization, if you wanted to buy something, we would order out of catalogs. That's how my wife and I would buy things, and not just me, the other executives at the base. And you would order from like a Spiegel catalog or this catalog or whatever. And then we had enough money saved that, whenever the bill came in, we would just pay it down to zero. So we never had any debt. But anyway, so I used that. I flew to Hawaii. I went to Hawaii for 10 days. And I have a picture of myself, standing there in 1990, with right in front of Diamond Head in Waikiki, where I was there. And I basically went by myself to, quote unquote, destimulate, to just get my head in order. And so I spent 10 days in Hawaii by myself. And then I'll never forget getting back on the plane to fly back to San Diego. I'm thinking to myself, now what I'm going to do? Now what am I going to do? I had no idea. I didn't know what I wanted to do work-wise. I didn't know where I was going to live. I thought, well, I'd love to live in San Diego, but I had no idea. So when I got back, it wasn't, I'd been back just a few days, and the phone rang at my father-in-law's house in San Diego, and I picked up the phone. And it turned out it was Janice Gillib Grady on the phone. And she said, hello, is this the blah blah whose daughter is Julie in San Diego? And I went, Janice. And she goes, Mark, I've been looking for you.
Wow. So she must have been trying to track you down and figure out, where you've been. How did she know you'd left? Because you left at about the same time, right? Was it just through the grapevine?
We actually left on my second escape. Her and her husband Paul, they left that same night. This was after the famous flood that happened at the international base, and we just thought Miscavige is nuts, and we're getting out of here. And we didn't even talk about it, But anyway, as soon as they recovered me, they told me, "Oh, well, you weren't the only one who left. Janice and Paul Grady left too." And I went, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm not crazy." So the next chance I got to leave, then I was like, oh, okay, great. Well, there's other people out here, because Janice's sister Terry and her husband Fernando, they had left about 8 months before that, and they were in Florida. So I knew that, and then Janice. But anyway, there was no internet, no cell phone. Janice just looked up. My ex-wife's last name is Catano, and it's a Portuguese name, and it's so it's not like Jones or Smith. So she just went in the in the information on the phone book and looked up for anybody named Catano in the San Diego area, because she knew my ex-wife was from down there, and she called, and that's how she found me.
Wow. That's hard work and dedication to try, go through. I imagine there's quite a number of people with that name in, lots of different states in America. Like, for her to kind of go through that and figure out which one is the right one. It shows the bond you must have with Janice from
Oh
very
yeah,
early.
well, we were just like, we're like, where are you at, Janice? Oh, we're up in, they were up in Santa Paula, California, north of Los Angeles. Oh, okay, great. I said, I'm getting in my car and I'll drive up to see you tomorrow. So I did. They were staying with her brother, and so I did. I drove up there, and then when we got there, we kind of reunited, and then we got Janice's sister Terry on the phone in Florida, and we all kind of just decided, look, why don't we all work together? Let's live someplace together, because you know Terry was in Florida, Janice and Paul were in California, I was in California, and we all kind of thought, oh, San Diego would be a great place, which is where I lived. So Terry, Janice's sister Terry and Fernando, they flew out and met up with me in San Diego, and we looked around and we thought about places to rent, and I rented a place and all that, and but there was no work. I couldn't. First of all, when you leave the Scientology Sea organization, I had all this experience in Scientology. You know what I mean? As a manager, overseeing the construction of a movie studio and a sound studio, all sorts of projects having to do with audio and visual and things like that. But I couldn't really put it on a resume because I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have anything that I thought would be valuable. And not only that, before I hooked up with Janice and Terry, while I was in Hawaii and all, I'm thinking, I don't even know what I want to do. Nothing, I was dedicated to the purpose of Scientology, of clearing the planet and saving mankind. And now that was taken away. I couldn't do that anymore. And so nothing interested me for a while. You know what I mean? Like any job I thought was just going to be drudgery and it was just going to be terrible. And then there was no work in San Diego at that time. This is 1990, and there was it was a downturn on the economy, and it was very expensive to live there. So what happened was Janice's sister Terry, she had a friend who was a Scientologist under the radar who was kind of going on his way out, and he had a mortgage business in Southern California, and he had moved to Denver, Colorado to open up another mortgage company. But he said, hey, listen, I'm moving to Las Vegas to open up a mortgage business there. I've got some people that want me to come and do that. Why don't you all come to Las Vegas and I'll teach you the mortgage business? And we couldn't think of anything better to do, but we all knew we wanted to go into some kind of business together. So we said, okay. And so that's how we ended up in Las Vegas. And that was Terry, Fernando, and I, we moved here to Las Vegas around Thanksgiving 1990. So it was literally 2 months after being out, we were in Las Vegas. And then Janice and Paul, Janice was pregnant at the time with their son, John. And Paul was doing some construction work, making some money. So they followed a couple of months later, like after Christmas or whatever. And we ended up getting a 2-bedroom apartment here in Las Vegas. Janice and Paul in one bedroom, Terry and Fernando in the other bedroom. And I slept on the pull-out couch in the living room.
Wow, what a giant leap of faith that must have been, of just, hey, let's just band together and start this company and make it happen. I mean, that's something that it's not just Sea Org, it's a Scientology mentality of just get it done, make it go right. So even though you're faced with all this uncertainty and you don't know what you're going to do with your life, it's like, well, look, we can't just sit around and wallow in our sorrows. We need to do something here. So it's quite admirable that you did that and you just kind of got your heads together and just made something happen, right?
Yeah, and it was completely like we had no idea what we were doing. Now we loved Las Vegas immediately, and we started working, but it was a commission only job, right? So I had savings and I had credit cards, and I ended up living off of both of those. Janice and Terry, they ended up getting they ended up getting positions at the mortgage company where they were paid like a salary. You know what I mean? So Paul and Janice and Terry and Fernando, they had money coming in. I didn't have any money coming in except living off my savings. And it wasn't long after that I learned how to be a loan officer, how to do mortgage loans. And I actually turned out to be, I was really good at it, but that the guy didn't pay very high commissions. So I ended up not making very much money. I ended up making less money than they paid the receptionist, even though I was bringing in business. So it was very hard.
But that still would have been more than in the Sea Org though, right? Because in the
Yeah,
Sea
it
Org,
was
$50 a week.
It was, but it was very scary because, you know, all of a sudden now I've got to pay rent, I've got to pay utilities, food, all the things that were covered in the CR I had to cover. And we were sharing at first in the 2-bedroom apartment, but then Janice was going to have her baby, so I had to get my own apartment. And then we also got another ex-Sea Org member named Kenny Lipton, and we got him to come to Las Vegas. So then we had another ex-Scientology Sea Org executive who's very famous. His sister was Peggy Lipton, who used to be married to Quincy Jones and was in the Mod Squad. Anyway, so we were starting a little group, and we were still very much Scientologists, believe it or not. Even though we were out, our viewpoint was, oh, L. Ron Hubbard's going to come back. You know, he said he's going to come back, so we'll just wait till then, and he'll always sorts things out. He'll get rid of Dave Miscavige, and then we'll go back. So we'll be out here for a few years, and then we'll come back. And that was our viewpoint at the time, which is crazy because it takes a while to peel the onion. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly. I think peeling the onion is such a good term, and I love that you use that for the name of your channel. And it links, you actually touched on there on the point that I was going to bring up next. There's someone in the chat here, Rune Sky Sitting, has said the flood, Miscavige was nuts. That must have been horrible. We talked briefly about this in the last episode, but I think that actually links into this question here that I was going to ask about peeling the onion. I think what a lot of people don't realize is when you leave, you know, everyone's recovery journey is different, right? Everyone heals in a different way. But what is quite a common thing I found is when you leave Scientology, some people just throw it all in the bin and they go, right, that's it. You know, I'm done. I don't believe in anything. But a lot of people leave Scientology, but they still believe in the belief system. They still believe in LRH and the tech, but they don't agree with Dave Miscavige and the leadership and the running of the church. Not everyone goes through that process, but a lot of people do. And so you said there that you had left the church, you didn't like Dave Miscavige, but you still hung on to the belief system. The flood links into this because I want to ask you about what that process was like for you in making that decision to leave but still believe in Scientology at the time, because the flood that happened at the Gold Base, obviously I wasn't there, but my understanding is Dave Miscavige, you know, lost his shit and, you know, was angry and punished a lot of people. What was that like for you in the moment, being someone so high up in Scientology, witnessing this abuse that's going on? You know, how did you process that in your head at the time?
Well, it was kind of like down the chain of several things that had happened. Obviously, I had blown and gone left because I wanted to go to the RPF, like we mentioned, and be with my wife. And then he found out, he made me the deputy de-weeder on the gold property, de-weeding the property, right? And I was going to go along with that. But then the thing that really got in my craw was that he issued, can you hear the leaf blower outside? I got to close the door otherwise.
I can't know, but if people in the chat can, leave a little comment.
No, that's okay. It's all right.
Carry
anyway,
on it's fine for me.
No, but anyway, they put out an issue to all the base crew, canceling everything I'd ever done in Scientology. And I was, you know, on my upper OT levels, I was a highly trained executive. I'd done the organization executive course and the flag executive briefing course and the data series evaluators course. And I was a trained auditor, and I had spent 13 years on my 2.5 hours study a day to get through all of this different stuff. And I actually was very proud of the training that I had done. And I thought, this can't be. They just canceled it willy-nilly. There was no justice action or anything like that. So that really upset me. And then I petitioned Ray Midoff, who was the Inspector General for Technical Matters, the base. But I knew Miscavige. Miscavige was over him, right? But I petitioned saying, hey, this is completely violates policy. You can't do something like this without me having at least a committee of evidence. And it was denied. So that's when I realized, oh, they're not playing by the same rules anymore by L. Ron Hubbard. So that stuck in my craw. And then, of course, I got beat up. I got beat up by Miscavige, you know. And then the flood happened. So that's kind of like how the sequence went. So when the flood happened, it was, you know, we were trying to get the what were called the G units out at on the gold property. They were basically bungalows that were on the property. We had a 600-acre property, and then we were getting them fixed up for Tom Cruise. Hold on one second.
I was gonna say I can hear it now myself.
Well, it was right outside my door. Sorry about that. Anyway, we were getting these bungalows ready for Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman to stay at. And then sure enough, Mitch Brisker, who I see is in the chat. Hi, Mitch. How you doing, brother? Anyway, and they were for Mitch Brisker. He had just been hired to be the, the professional director to direct all the Scientology films and all that. So, they were being set up, and they got flooded completely. Two of the units got completely filled with mud up to your waist. And it was a flash flood. Basically, it rained for about 20 minutes, and the property's right up against a mountainside that just has sagebrush and twigs and boulders on it, and it all came rushing down across the property. So Miscavige basically lost his what. And we were all trying to salvage what we could. And at dinner time that night, because the flood happened about 12 noon, 1 o'clock, everybody was out there in their clothes trying to salvage. And it's lucky nobody got killed. Anyway, he called a muster, a big, gathered the whole base, 600 people in the dining area. And then he marched in, and I was standing there. He made all the gold crew stand at the front at attention. Of course, I was in the gold crew at the time. And then he just basically went off on how it was all Gold's fault, this flood and all this damage, and that there was going to be hell to pay for it. And then, we were going to get, anybody does blah, 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 you're going to the RPF. And if you don't do that, then you're kicked out of Scientology. And he literally was foaming at the mouth. His spittle was coming out of his mouth. And I'm literally looking at him, and Paul Grady, Janice's husband, was standing next to me. We didn't even say anything to each other. We both came to the conclusion, this guy's nuts, and we need to get the hell out of here, right? So that night, of course, I had access to my car because I had gotten, back in a little bit of good standing and stuff. And, they were going to have the gold crew stay up all night, getting sandbags ready and getting the mud out and all that sort of stuff. And I basically went, well, I've got to go home because I've got to be sessionable in the morning because they're going to do security checking on me. So I was allowed to go home. I got in my car, I grabbed a bag, and I drove off, and I took off again. That was the second time that I left. And that's when I found out that Janice and Paul had left.
I think you touched on there something that's really important to understand, is that David Miscavige rules with an iron fist, but he rules with fear, right? If you stand up and say, you're nuts, or I don't agree with what you're doing, or you're hurting people, or whatever, he has complete and total control over the entirety of Scientology, and it's very hard to go against the grain or go against his will, because he will just punish you, and he will send you off and put you in the hole or make you do hard manual labor or whatever. So it's very hard. So actually what you did by leaving is the right thing, because you can help probably more people from outside, and looking for your own safety first, right?
Right. And I just want to point out that I had been around Miscavige for the previous 7 years, working with him on a daily basis, and he wasn't always like that. Okay. I met him when he was 16 years old, when we both joined the Sea Organization, and he wasn't always like that. He was always a go-getter. He was always a make things go right and get things done. And he always was tough to deal with, but he wasn't like, oh, we're going to lock you up and put you in the hole, and then I'm going to beat you. And ordering other people to beat up other staff members, that all happened after I left. You know what I mean? So it built up where he was like, getting more and more power. And then when Hubbard died in 1986, right, all of a sudden he had to take over power, which he did. That's a long story, and he took over power. But then once he basically realized that he was in control, he realized he could do pretty much whatever he wanted to, and he would get away with it, right? And I wasn't going to put up with that. Like when he attacked me physically, I looked him right in the eyes, and I said, so I didn't lay a finger on you. I basically went, this is not Scientology, man. This is not what we do. We're not here to beat up people and to act like that, right? I was basically being an adult, and so I was not willing to put up with that. And so we all kind of independently got up to a point where we were so fed up. We were just like, I can't deal with this. And then I had the problem with, I didn't want to leave my wife there, but they'd turned her against me. We've been married for 6 years. We'd never had a fight, an argument, or anything. But as soon as I left to come back, she didn't want having to do talk to me or anything like that. So I kept coming back because I wanted to get her back. But that's what Scientology and the Sea Organization do. They split up the married couples when somebody leaves, and they try and turn the person against them. And that's eventually what happened. So when I realized that she was not coming with me, the first chance I had to get out on September 15th, 1990, that's when I left for good, and I didn't look back.
And it's very classic dictator mentality, right? If you look at, I don't want this to turn into a history lesson, but if you look at other, political dictators in history, they surround themselves with yes people. If someone goes against the grain and says no, they punish them and remove them from the picture and replace them with someone who says yes. So all of the people surrounding David Miscavige are the people that are enabling his activities and his behavior, because if you say no, like you said, that you just get thrown aside or punished. And he's over time built this situation where he's surrounded by people that say yes, because, well, perhaps some of the, I don't know any of these people personally, I'm sure there are people in there who are horrible people that want to cause harm to others, but I imagine, especially in those early days, a lot of his inner circle were people who didn't agree with what he was doing and were removed and punished for disagreeing and trying to stop his behavior. And you're an example of
That's
that.
exactly right. That's why Terry Gamboa, Janice's sister, left. She was the executive director of author services. That's why I left. That's why Janice left. There were other people that left as well, all senior managers at that time. And we all went, this is not what L. Ron Hubbard wanted to have done. And Miscavige, basically, nobody was going to say no. And when I realized that, see, most staff would not know this because they didn't interact with Miscavige in those days. And I even think later on they probably didn't either. The rank and file Sea Org members and staff members and orgs, they didn't really connect with it. But I worked with them every day, and I could see this stuff happening. And I also was raised as, I studied L. Ron Hubbard policy and how to treat people and this and that. And yeah, L. Ron Hubbard has some crazy ideas and all that, but it was he was much more benevolent in terms of, like, we're here to help people and to clear the planet. We're not here to kiss David Miscavige's feet, or even kiss L. Ron Hubbard's feet. And so what I'm saying is that I could see it, whereas the average staff member, they probably thought I was nuts when I left, because they were, other than they went, oh, well, that's just how it is. He's just not tough enough. But I knew exactly, because I was involved. I was right there behind the door,
And I hear also from speaking to people who were around when L. Ron Hubbard was running the ship, so to speak, that Hubbard himself had many sides to him. I've spoken to people who worked with him on the ship and said, a lot of the time he was nice and lovely, and some of the time he was locking children in the chain locker. And it was almost like he had different personalities. You don't know which one you're going to meet. But a lot of the time, people weren't even aware of people being locked away and stuff like that, even his close circle. And so some people were aware, some people weren't, even in Hubbard's time.
No, you're absolutely right. We just did a video interview with Sandy Holman on our channel, which you can watch at Our Scientology Stories, Peeling the Onion, literally yesterday. And Janice and Sandy were on the ship together with L. Ron Hubbard. They were in their 20s. And I heard stories that I'd never heard of before about people being locked up because they were having a psychotic break, basically. And they were locked up and fed with food from a pail and had to use pail to go to the bathroom. That's not what I ever saw. That never happened. And I was shocked. And they tell these stories, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, apparently it went on. And then Janice, rightly so, said, look, that's all I knew. I got in Scientology when I was born, and I didn't know any different or any better at the time. But they were, quote unquote, L. Ron Hubbard's trying to help these people and get them calmed down so that they could then be gotten off the ship. So you're absolutely right. I mean, this stuff happened, but the average staff member would not know about this stuff. You know what I mean?
And if you did hit, me, I was much lower down in the organization than you. I worked at London Org. selling books. So, my experience was vastly different to someone in the Sea Org or someone over in the
Right.
US, especially someone in international management. And whenever we would hear something like this, someone would come into the org, there'd be a protest or whatever, we would just be like, that's insane. It's clearly made up and not true, because David Miscavige comes up on stage at all of these events and he's making Scientology expand and he's a great guy. And, we would know if we, the people who worked in the org had met David Miscavige on multiple occasions, and it's just not true for them. And they just think that that's insane, because he has this image, this brand image to most Scientologists, but behind the scenes, he's a very different person by the sounds of things. Mitch
Oh,
Brisker here is
absolutely.
saying
Now,
Miscavige could be
go
charming
ahead.
and generous.
Go
That's
ahead.
why he was such a dangerous psychopath.
I was just going to say, let me put in a plug for Mitch's book here, Scientology, The Big Lie. I'm almost done with this book, and I love this book, Mitch. If you're listening right now, it is fantastic. It's well written. And you know what? It follows the same pattern of what I, realized, and what I, dealt with Miscavige from the time he was 16 until I left the Sea Organization at age 32 and he was 30 years old. It just got worse, but it's the same thing, the same behavior, the same patterns. And it's like the more power that he got, the more he knew he could get away with, because there was nobody who was going to say boo. Once they got the IRS tax exemption, and after there was a period where the IRS was monitoring what they were doing, then he could do whatever he wanted, And then I just read about the ideal organizations in Mitch's book, you know what I mean? And this was Miscavige's bright idea, was like, well, we can't take celebrities in there from Tom Cruise into these organizations. They're a bunch of, crappy locations and stuff, right? Oh, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to invest and spend millions of dollars that we've gotten from donations from people, and we're going to build these palaces, right? And lo and behold, people will magically then go into Scientology. I mean, literally, I just finished reading that in Mitch's book. Like Miscavige is delusional enough to think, I'm going to build all these things, and at that point, then we'll be able to get a lot of people in there, which is completely ridiculous. It's like putting the cart before the horse. You know what I mean? Anyway, I just highly recommend Mitch's book. I'm going to have him on at some point and interview him, because I have lots of questions and comments, but it's just really, really a good book. So if you get a chance, order Mitch's book, Scientology, The Big Lie. Anyway.
There you go. Mitch is saying, thanks, Mark, in the chat. Mitch is awesome. I agree. Go and show him some love too. Mark, let's talk a little bit about fair game, because you alluded to this at the end of your the last interview we did. You said that once you left, you experienced some fair game. Can you talk me through, was that immediately after you left? Because fair game is meant to be against people who are deemed a threat to Scientology. And, but on paper, someone who leaves the Sea Organization is not necessarily a threat and therefore going to be subject to fair game, unless you go out speaking about Scientology and doing interviews and, trying to attack the church. That's how it's supposedly meant to be applied. But that's not exactly the case, is it? How did the fair game start, and why did it start? Was it because you were so close to Miscavige and he saw you as a threat?
Well, I'll tell you exactly. It started immediately when we were in Las Vegas. We get in Las Vegas and we're working in the mortgage business, right? And we still were Scientologists in our mind. I mean, literally, people asked us, we would disseminate, we'd give them Dianetics books. We were basically Scientologists, right? But lo and behold, they send in, we find out years, later, but Scientology, David Miscavige and Office of Special Affairs sends in a guy. His name was Dave LeBeau, okay? And they send him in, and he gets to get hired by our mortgage company, and we become friends with him. Okay, we go to dinner together. We play racquetball together. We talk. He's a good guy. We're having a good time. We disseminated to him. We gave him a Dianetics book. We were disseminating to him, and he eventually moved into the apartment complex where we lived across the way. Anyway, we had no idea though that he was a paid private investigator spy by Scientology. We found out. I'll tell you that story, how we found out. But he's the guy that eventually, I don't know if you ever saw it, he became the biggest private investigator for Scientology for years. He's the one that spied on Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun and set up the Squirrel Busters and all that, right, for years. But we were his first case. He literally he was a mechanic at the original Scientology private investigator was a guy named Gene Ingram, who was an ex-LAPD cop, right? And he had an ATV business, like a off-road vehicle business. And Dave LeBeau was a mechanic there. And he got Dave LeBeau and said, look, I want to send you here and you can spy and basically be our friends, and then you report everything up to Scientology. So that's what they did. He did my tax returns the first couple of years. He knew exactly what my financial situation was because he worked for a tax firm, as a side business and this and that. And we were so naive. We believed nobody would lie to us. I mean, when you're in Scientology and the Sea Organization, somebody lies to you, they get in ethics trouble. So, it takes peeling the onion again of trying to realize that, in the real world, that's not how things are, right?
Why do you think
he was spying on us.
I was just going to say, before we get into how you found out, why do you think he was sent to spy on you from very early on?
I know exactly.
You were so close and you were a threat?
That's exactly right. And Scientology at the time was trying to get tax-exempt status in the early 90s, right? And this is 1991, right? And also Time Magazine had just come out with their article in 1991 called Scientology, the Cult of Greed. And it was a huge deal. And they were going to sue, they did sue Time Magazine and all these different people and stuff, right? So they wanted to keep an eye on us for the tax-exempt region, number one, because Terry Gamboa, Janice's sister, and I worked directly for Miscavige. But Terry was she was like a trustee of the Church of Spiritual Technology, and that was supposedly a lifetime appointment. And she knew all the inner workings of the corporate sort out that was done in the early 80s to protect Hubbard from the IRS. And she knew how Miscavige worked, and I knew how Miscavige worked. And basically the IRS was saying, no, you guys can, David Miscavige controls everything. And all the money is going to L. Ron Hubbard, right? And that they're absolutely right about that, but they were basically trying to hide that. So us being out there was a threat to that tax-exempt status and the IRS. He was afraid that we were going to speak out and that we were going to go to the authorities. And that's why he wanted to keep an eye on us. And it also followed the pattern of after a guy named Pat Broker, who had been with L. Ron Hubbard, for years while he was on the run. When he got kicked out and there was a power play and they got rid of him in 1987, Miscavige and OSA, they hired private investigators to then follow that guy for 25 years at $1 million a year. These guys made a ton of money, and they liked the information. Miscavige liked the information they were getting from that PI. So they thought, well, let's keep an eye on Fisher and Gamboa and the Grady's. And that's how that happened.
Did you know that Pat and Annie Broker were being followed when you were working for Miscavige in those years? Did you know anything about any sort of fair game, PIs being hired, any of that at all? Nothing.
No, again, like you said, there's basically separation from different positions. Like I worked for Miscavige for years, but I didn't know what the relationship was with the Office of Special Affairs or any of the legal matters. That was Marty Rathman. And basically, whenever Marty came into Dave's office, they shut the door between my office and his. And so I never was privy to any of that stuff. That was all kept quiet at that time.
So how did you
I got to tell you, though, what they did. Huh? Go ahead.
Yeah, go on. No, go on.
Well, no. So then what happened was Scientology's operation, and what they try and do is we started amassing a group of people at the mortgage company of ex-Scientology Sea Org members. We had Kenny Lipton, like I mentioned. We had a guy named Jeff Walker, who was the senior case supervisor international that replaced Ray Midoff. He left the Sea Organization. We had two other executives from the Commoner's Messenger Org. They left the Sea Organization. They all came to Las Vegas, and we gave them jobs. So our group of 5 people quickly grew to about 10, and they were all senior executives who had been at the Int base and had, things happening with Miscavige. So Scientology OSA playbook, as directed by Hubbard, is break the group up. You know what I mean? Like cause enough internal conflict so that they all decide, oh, we're going to go our separate ways. We can't work like this and this and that. So Dave LeBeau was involved in quite a bit of that in terms of, getting us all to, sort of go our own separate ways. And then also they wanted to get Terry Gamboa was the biggest threat to the IRS tax exempt status, that the blocking the IRS, you know what I'm saying? Anyway,
Yes.
they wanted her out of the country because they were so concerned that they were going to she was going to go to the IRS and that would kill getting the tax exempt status. So they set up another private investigator and two guys to set up a ruse to get Terry and her husband Fernando out of the country and get them to move to Australia. And what they did was they hired two guys who were British to come to our mortgage company and pose as these corporate executives from Hong Kong, right? Who, were international financiers and this and that, right? And basically we were naive enough that they impressed us and all that. But anyway, they got to like Fernando and Terry, of course, right? And they were going like, well, here's what we want. We want to set up a horse ranch in Australia because we have clients from Hong Kong that we like to send on trips to different places, right? And Terry Gamboa is a horse fanatic. She's been a horsewoman since she was a little girl, and she to this day, she's into horses, right? So, we need to get we need somebody to go to Australia and find a property that we can either buy or lease that has horses, and then we'll start sending clients there. And you and Fernando would be perfect for that. As a matter of fact, we'll pay you $100,000 a year and all your expenses to go down to Australia and move to Australia in order to do that. Well, they did that. Terry and Fernando took that deal and they moved to Australia, and it was all paid for and set up by Scientology. And we didn't know it at the time. We found out afterwards, because as soon as the tax exempt status was gotten by the IRS, all of a sudden, yeah, we don't need the ranch anymore, and you guys can go back to the United States. So
It's
they were
very
there for about 3
crafty.
years and made a
Yeah.
lot of money, and it was all Scientology money to get them out of the country.
It's very crafty. I think this is something that people who have never been in Scientology, or even people who were in Scientology but weren't privy to OSA and their operations, it's something that is kind of hard to wrap your head around the way OSA works. Because yes, there are the overt attacks, like we've all seen the videos of the squirrel busters going to shout and intimidate Marty and Mike and all of that overt stuff that's done. But the majority of what OSA does is actually very, very sneaky. Like you say, they planted someone inside the organization long term to work with you, befriend you, and feed information back. And it's not like they came and directly said, hey, you need to move to Australia, because that's just weird. They kind of build a relationship and they kind of end up coercing this person to do what OSA wants without that person even knowing that that's what OSA wants. It's not like she would have known that OSA are trying to get her out of the country to be in Australia. It's a business deal. It's completely unrelated to Scientology. Why would Scientology try and move me to Australia? Like, what's the benefit in that? But afterwards, with hindsight, you can see, that makes sense now. It's very manipulative and sneaky, the way that OSA operate.
Yeah, and so they did very well. But then, for me, I got to the point where I wasn't making enough money to be able to pay my bills, and I got to the point where I was going to be evicted from my apartment because I couldn't make enough money. I mean, I would work hard and all that, but just the commissions they paid. Just to give you an idea, okay, whatever the commissions are, there's 100%, right? Well, we got paid 10 to 15% commission of that 100%. Well, standard in the mortgage business, which we didn't know, was 50%, right? Wow. So that 10 to 15%, I was making about $1,200 to $1,500 a month, as opposed to making $4,000 to $5,000 a month. So, we were grinding. I was grinding, and I couldn't pay my bills because I didn't have a salary. Like, and even Terry and Janice and all that, they were basically living. We were living very meagerly, right? Because we had the feeling we thought, oh, we can make a lot of money doing mortgages, but no, it was set up so that I basically ground through my money. I've gotten in debt on my credit cards and all that. So I took a job. I had a falling out with an employee who wasn't one of our Scientologists there because I needed a mortgage loan to close. And I just got upset with them because they did something wrong, and it cost me the money I needed to pay my rent. I lost it, and I got fired. I got fired because the people that were partners with the Scientologists, they were not Scientologists, and they weren't used to dealing with us who were Scientologists, and we weren't used to dealing with them. So I didn't even really go crazy or anything like that, but I just got really upset about it, and they just fired me on the spot. So I had nowhere to go. Anyway, so I ended up moving to Texas. This is how we found out about Dave LeBeau. I ended up getting a job a year later, September 1991, in Houston, Texas, with a guy that I had met who owned nightclubs in Houston, and he wanted to open a location in Las Vegas. And
I was
he and
going
I
to ask
hit it off.
why Texas? Why did you go there?
Yeah.
Is it because of this guy that wanted to open a club?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you exactly why. I literally was about to be out on the street. I had no job. I had no money. I was in debt. All I had was my car and my clothes, right? And I didn't know what I was going to do. Anyway, I met this guy because I was trying to help him set up, arrange financing here in Las Vegas. And then he called me and I said, look, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to help you anymore because I lost my job, and I basically briefly told him what happened. And he said, well, pack up your shit, get in your car. And he goes, drive down here and I'll put you to work at my club. And you can stay with me and my wife until you get on your feet. And I had no other options at the time. I went, okay, that's what I'll
a nice
do. And
guy. Yeah.
well, he was my friend my best friend until the day he died from COVID about a year and a half ago. And we were, daily basis in touch and all that. Now, this business, he owned nightclubs, right? But they were gentlemen's clubs. Okay. If anybody, that's just a euphemism for strip joints down in Houston, Texas. Okay. So you can imagine what Miscavige thought about that, because they were spying on us. Oh my God, he's down working at a gentleman's club in Houston, Texas. I was made the manager in charge of promotion and marketing. So my job was to get customers through the door. And what I loved about it, my friend, he'd been in the business for years, but he was a straight shooter. In other words, he was not into drugs. He was not into anything. He just was in the bar and liquor and bar business, food, liquor and bar. That's what it was. And he treated it that way. All of his managers had to be drug tested. In other words, it was like a clean operation because I'd never done drugs. And even after leaving Scientology, just never had. And I didn't really drink, But anyway, so he and I hit it off. And while I was down in Texas, just to make a long story short, I did all the promotions for him for about 3 years. I got people in the door. The nightclub numbers of people in were huge, and did really, really well. And so I was down there working. I had a great time. It was a lot of fun, and I got to meet celebrities and rock stars and you name it, right? But anyway,
did you ever get up on the table on the pole yourself, Mark?
No, but I was put up there once for my birthday.
Excellent.
And listen, look, some people may think, oh, that's terrible. Why could you do that? Right. You know what I mean? I treated it like a business. I've known many, many dancers and entertainers over the years, many. Okay. Everybody's in it just in like any job. Everybody's in it for whatever it is that they're trying to do. I know ones that have been very successful, gone to college, got degrees, and I know ones that have petered out and drunks and all that. You know what I mean? So I realize it's not a great business, right? But it was my way out at the time, so I took it. Plus, it was a sports bar, so it was sports and entertainment and all that. So I moved to Houston, Texas. But anyway, back to how we found out about David LeBeau being a Scientology spy. I wasn't down there 10 days, and he flies down there and he calls me up and he says, hey, Mark, I'm in town for, checking out a mortgage deal here in Texas. Let's get together for lunch, right? So he pulls up in the Cadillac and picks me up, and we go out for lunch, and he's asking me questions about, what are you doing now, and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And we had already talked to him a bit about David Miscavige and our disagreements and why we left Scientology. So he's asking me about, well, how do you feel about Miscavige now? And this, he asked questions to the point where I went like, hey, something's wrong with this
Bit
guy.
weird.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the red flags came up, and I started going. After he left, I called Janice, right? And I said, Dave LeBeau's down here. I said, I think he's a plant. I think he's a Scientology spy. And she goes, well, what's he doing in Texas? I said, he's down there doing a mortgage deal, he said. She goes, he's not closing anything up here at the mortgage company. I said, we don't know how he's getting his money, right? So that was the red flags. And then shortly thereafter, there was a mutual friend in the mortgage business who met Dave LeBeau at our company. And one time he was out with David LeBeau or whatever, and he said, hey, well, how are you living? You don't have any mortgages happening. He says, oh, that's not what I'm doing. I'm here. I'm being paid to watch some people down here. I work for a private investigator. And that guy told Janice, and that's how we totally confirmed it.
Wow. And how long had that been that he'd been a plant in your life? It was quite a number of years, I understand.
Almost 2.5 years, yeah.
2.5
And then
years.
we decided we weren't going to tell him that we knew, because it was better to know who it was, because we weren't doing anything. You know what I mean? We weren't speaking to any media. We weren't speaking to anybody. We were just trying to get on with our life. You know what I mean? Trying to make money, right? But so we kept it quiet, and then eventually he did find out that we knew, and then he moved on to other people who spoke out against Scientology, and yada yada yada. The rest is history as far as that goes.
You mentioned there that you weren't speaking out, you were just getting on with your life. What
Right.
what was that journey like? Like, what made you make the jump from getting on with it, doing your own thing and just moving on, to where we're at now, where you're actively speaking out and trying to help people get out and share stories publicly on YouTube?
Well, I always wanted to speak out, but Paul, Janice's husband at the time, they basically eventually they bought the mortgage company, and then I moved back from Texas a couple of years later because they wanted me back because they knew I was a good loan officer, and they increased the commissions. So I decided to move back, right? But he didn't want any heat from Scientology he didn't want Janice speaking out. Plus, they had kids, they were just having a new family. I mean, you know how it was just different back then. There was no internet, there was no place to speak out. If you got contacted by a reporter, it was like maybe an article will come out someday. You know what I mean? So when I did come back to Las Vegas in 1993, I then hooked up with two ex-Sea Org members who were speaking out, and they were dear friends of mine, and they're old guard critics of Scientology, and that's Vaughn and Stacy Young. And Robert Vaughn Young, Stacy Young, I don't know if you ever heard of them, but
I recognize the name, but I don't know them.
Okay, well, at the time when I hooked back up with them, Stacy had been my twin when I was in the rehabilitation project force. She and I had known each other for years, but we got each other through the program and graduated together. So we were connected like this, right? Her husband, Vaughn Young, had been in the Guardian's office as a spokesman for Scientology in the 1970s. And he did a lot of investigations on some of the CIA programs like MK Ultra and things like that the Freedom magazine used to put out that were actually pretty good, right? And then he also worked at Author Services, and he edited all of L. Ron Hubbard's books for Mission Earth and Battlefield Earth, because Hubbard would just type away and blah, 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 blah. And then he'd send them to Vaughn, and Vaughn would actually say, hey, we should cut it here and do this sort of stuff, right? Anyway, to make a long story short, they left around the same time we did from Scientology, but they hooked up with an attorney and a guy who was suing Scientology, and the guy was featured in that Time magazine article, The Cult of Greed, in 1991, and they were hired as expert witnesses to decipher all the Scientology policy and orders and technical bulletins to the attorneys, because the attorneys had no idea what they were looking at, right? So they were being paid big bucks to consult these attorneys at the time. So I found out that they were in California when I got back to Las Vegas. I immediately went and spent Christmas with them down in Orange County, California, and we reconnected there. And they told me what they were doing and all that, and I would give them information. But I wanted to be under the radar, that type of thing, because I didn't want the heat. They were getting huge fair game. I mean, they were public enemy. They were Leah Remini and Mike Rinder. At that time, they were the biggest public enemies. They, Stacy and Vaughn would go on television shows like MTV and 60 Minutes and speak out. And I literally would go and travel to see them over several years, to go see them and meet with them, and we would talk because we were friends. So that's how I started speaking out. But Paul, who owned the mortgage company at that point, did not want any of us doing anything that was high profile.
And that's a big jump in, mentally in your mind, from getting on with your life, doing your own thing, then speaking out under a pseudonym or under the radar, to now being publicly, hey, this is who I am and I've got nothing to hide. There's been a huge shift. It's clear to see from when you left Scientology in 1990 to where we're at now. There are more people talking about it. There's websites, there's newspapers. It's much more of a current topic now. I can only imagine that OSA are struggling to keep up with fair gaming everybody that speaks out. So in a way, it's safer to speak out publicly now than it ever was.
Right, and then when they finally did speak out in 2006, I'm not going to go. I know we're short on time, but in 2006, when I did speak out, start speaking out just on a private chat group on Yahoo called XSO members, right? And that's when I first started speaking out in a private chat group. We did a whole video on that with the spy files that Mark Headley got from Mike Rinder, where OSA was like going after me because I was speaking out in that, and they were trying to ruin my career, ruin my life, turn me into the IRS. They did this whole setup with me going overseas to Thailand and these other places that, people try and, smear me and black PR me and all that. And it was all Scientology operations against me to discredit me, So I did a video with Aaron Smith-Levin last July when I saw the actual documentation, and I explained exactly what happened. But so they viciously went after me. And there's a whole other story too, which I can't go into right now. But again, they had a guy who posed as my best friend, became my friend, and was my friend for over 10 years on the payroll of Scientology, saying everything that I was doing up until 2009, when I spoke out in the Truth Rundown on the Tampa Bay Times. You know what I mean? So anyway, I have a long history of people coming after me, and I'm still standing. By the way, MFers, and my nickname from OSA is Mofo, okay? Mofo, and we all know what a mofo is, right? And it had to come from a scavenge. It wouldn't have come from anybody else. And I proudly wear that because you know what? I'll speak out. I don't care. They can do whatever they want to me. I got nothing to lose at this point.
Do you think the fair game against you has changed or lessened? And or do you just think that you're harder to it now? Like, I get the same thing. There's tweets and stuff all the time trying to discredit me and attack me, and I just pay no attention to it. But you've had this for a longer period of time, and they've really tried to meddle with your life, with your business, as you talked about before. Is it that they've stopped trying because, I don't know, they don't have enough people or money or resources or whatever? Or is it that you're just so accustomed to it now, you've put protections in place to prevent them being able to fair game you? What do you think?
Well, the only thing they've tried to do since we started our YouTube channel is they started having, OSA bots, people come into the chat and, try and smear me in the chat. We just block it, or we just don't take up those comments, because the fact of the matter is they have hate white websites up on me and all that. I've never looked at them. I don't really care. You know what I mean? The only reason they do that is to get you to care, to get you to go, oh my God, don't say those things about me, right? Because they want to get a reaction out of you, number one. And number two, they hope that your employer or other people you do business with will look at them and maybe that'll hurt your business. And I'm retired. I don't have any business now, so I don't really care. And I've had people, I'm not going to mention the person, but, they put up different channels and different stores. And I just ignore it,
I was going to say, do you think being retired has played a big part? Because in a way, it's harder to mess with you in a physical, real world sense, because you don't have a business. It's not like your life. It's harder to infiltrate and penetrate your life now than it was when you were trying to start a new business with Janice and get that off the ground. Do you think that's played a part in protecting you from the fair game?
Definitely, because when we first left, I was 32 years old, and my life was ahead of me, and we had we just wanted to make money and have a successful life, and Janice wanted to have a family, and Paul did, and that was it. You know what I mean? So now I'm 65 years old now, and you know, I'm retired. I do some work here and there, but nothing that they can affect. And I think, to be honest with you, I think the dike is breaking. You know, there's so many people. We started this channel after Aaron Smith Levin and Mark and Claire Headley and Mike Rinder, all these guys doing it. They're much bigger fish as far as that goes than me and Janice and you, to be honest with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now you're taking action though in the UK, so you're actually getting effective action done with members of parliament and stuff. So that creates a bigger target on you, right, from their perspective. But I think they're so overwhelmed with all the different stuff that's going on with the lawsuits, with Danny Masterson, with Leah Remini, with this and that, that, you know, what are they going to do to our channels? I mean, there's 100 of them, you know, it's just, it's coming at them from all angles.
Yeah, there's nothing they can do in a way. And also they're shrinking. There's less and less of them. So they have less resource to put towards messing with people. So I think they're very much focusing on the big fish, you know, the real imminent threats to their existence, which are, you know, lawsuits like Leah Remini's lawsuit and, you know, Val Haney's case and all of this is going on. They are a much bigger threat. So I think they're gearing all of their resources towards that.
And I think they should be afraid. They should be afraid of Danny Masterson. This is my opinion only. I don't have any. It's just my opinion, because I think at some point when he loses his appeal or whatever, hey, what's to preclude him from making a deal with the prosecutors, saying, I'm going to give you all the dirt on Scientology, David Miscavige, and all the stuff that they did to block me, you know, or block this stuff from coming out, and let them go after him.
Are you suggesting criminal isn't going to work?
He could get a lower sentence. Sentences do get reduced. I've talked to attorneys and also police officials who have said, oh, that happens all the time. You know, mob cases, people who are killers, you know what I mean, get a reduced sentence because they rat out a bunch of people. So I'd be concerned about Danny Masterson, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask you one more question, but before I do, I'm going to say to everyone in the chat, if you have questions for Mark or I, put the questions in the live chat, and I'll star them as we sort of wrap things up here, and we can do a bit of Q&A. So anything you want to ask Mark or I, stick it in there now, and we'll go through them. While you're doing that, I think my question for you, Mark, is what let's look forward here into the future. You know, what are your plans? What have we got to look forward to? You've got your two channels, your travel channel, your Peeling the Onion channel. Like, what are you trying to achieve with both of those? And what did you set out to try and do with those channels?
Well, the Peeling the Onion channel we started with Janice Gillum Grady, my partner. And basically, we just want to tell stories, the history. We want to tell this history of Scientology before David Miscavige, you know, because those people are all getting older, and, you know, several of them have passed away. But historically, we want people to know how Scientology started and how it grew to the point where it was big and thriving in the late 70s and 80s, right? And then how it crashed, right? And then we also want to give voice to the abuse stories. You know, people, we just did an interview, like I said, with Sandy Holman, who was on the ship, and other people like Danielle Chamberlain, and we want to get out the stories. We've got another interview that we're doing with Scott and Carrie Campbell. We've done already several with them on the Free Wins, but I'm telling you, the abuse that was done to Scott Campbell, when you hear that story, it really made me angry. And this all happened before Lisa McPherson, okay, the woman who died in Clearwater, Florida. So we're giving voice to the people. We don't judge people in terms of their viewpoint. If they're still Scientologists and they want to talk, that's fine with us. We don't make fun of it, you know, because people have the right to believe whatever they want, but we also want to point out the abuses and the things that are crazy that went on. So that's that channel. And then on my Las Vegas Travel and More channel, that's just a fun channel. I mean, you and I did a video on my trip to London in 2004, and we went through the photographs, and we just had a good old time chatting about that. You know, I like to travel. We're going to be going on a cruise here in March out of Long Beach, California. And, you know, if anybody's interested in going on a cruise with us for 3 days out of Long Beach, you can email me at messengerondutymf@gmail.com. That's messengerondutymf@gmail.com. Very inexpensive, but we're basically just a meet and greet, get together, and just talk and meet people. So anyway, so that's my plans. I want to travel, and I love doing the show, and I'm still taking care of my mother. My mother's still alive. She's 93 years old. So, I've got plenty to do.
Amazing. And what a true champion you are. You're one of the, you used the term old guard earlier, but I think a lot of people that are like me, new to this space, the whole YouTube speaking out thing, a lot of people don't realize that this wouldn't be possible without the hard work and determination of people like yourself, because you guys put in the work and dealt with the harassment and the fair game. And without that, we wouldn't live in a world where it's possible for us to speak out and start YouTube channels and speak out without as much fair game and harassment as you guys did. So in a way, we have a lot of thanks to give you guys, because if you hadn't have done that, we wouldn't be here today, because we would be the ones dealing with the fair game and harassment and intimidation. I mean, we still do. That is still a thing that goes on. But I mean, like we said earlier, there was people planted in your business. They really tried to destroy your life. It was much more intense than it is now. So in a way, I'm saying thank you for that work and the fact that you're still here and living to tell the tale.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Alex. And the work that you're doing now, I mean, you're a younger generation. I mean, there's years of work that you can do going forward. It's not that I'm so old, but I'm just trying to supplement whatever else that is going on. Because Dave Miscavige has to end. The whole harassment, the scams that they're running, the donation programs, all that stuff. It's got to stop. It's got to end. And the only way we do it is bringing sunshine to the problem and giving information. I mean, we've never been challenged on any of the information or stories that we've been given. You know what I mean? It's not like they come out and say like, oh, well, that's not true. Oh, well, here's the real story, or anything like that. No, because we have no vested interest. That's the other thing too. It's not like I'm getting paid, to do this sort of thing. We make some money on our channel, but it's peanuts. It's nothing. It basically keeps us going, putting on the show. So it's not like we're doing this to get rich, and so we're doing it because I truly care about the people that are still in. I still have my ex-wife in there. She's remarried, but I have friends that are still in there. And now a lot of them are my age or older, and I worry about what they're going to be like and how they're going to take care of them as elderly people. So anyway, that's my motivation. Sorry.
No, that's amazing. It's a great reason to be doing what you're doing, and that genuine care, right? That's still there, even for people you haven't seen in many years. I think that's really admirable. All right, let's go through some of these. So Natalie Grant said, I think they believe they are saving the world. That's such a good point. That's exactly what you think when you're in Scientology. You are clearing the planet, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mixed Mutt wanted to say, totally off subject, but Mark, I have loved your shirts. I also love the shirts that you wear.
It's warm enough to wear it today. We've had, well, in comparison to the UK, it's nothing, but we were pretty cold for 2 weeks. So anyway.
I've been in thermals with my big thick socks on.
Me too. Me too.
So
me too, but we were above freezing, so I just was cold, so I wore my long underwear too.
We're below freezing right now in London. I don't even want to think about it. Christina Pepin or Peepin. Hi guys, Estonia represent. That's awesome.
Hey.
Someone from Estonia. Welcome to the chat.
Thank you so much.
And then there's a question, or someone here, Nicole, is saying knowledge is power. I totally agree with that. And Kelly has a question here. Question for Mark. Have you seen any of the recent videos of Flag and or LA, having been liberated from Church Scientology for a long time? What do you think when you see the current SEAL members rushing about?
Yeah, I've watched some of them. I know that these are the live streams and stuff that are being done in front of the test center and the base in Clearwater, Florida. As a matter of fact, Janice is going to Clearwater next week. She's going to Florida for a
Oh, amazing.
memorial on a very famous ex-Sea Org member who passed away
Right.
recently. But anyway, but she's going to go down there and hopefully hook up with the people that are down there and actually show her face in front of those buildings. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, no, I mean, they're all young kids. I mean, the people that are in the Sea Org now, they probably weren't even born when I left the Sea Org 33 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, most of them are probably teenagers and in their 20s, and they're second or third generation Scientologists, and they just don't know what's going on in the real world because it's an insulated ivory tower that they live in. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And same when I was in Scientology, I was a teenager, and most of the people that I worked with at London were second, third gen Scientologists. They know better. They don't know anything different. So, when you sign your SEAL contract, you think that's the right thing to do because you haven't had any outside experience. If you've grown up in Scientology, I didn't. I joined, but it's a whole different ball game. Whereas when you were in Scientology, it was very much people who joined when LRH was still alive. It's almost a whole different category of person in Scientology now.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know who are the top command under Miscavige. He's not long for this world. I mean, he has health issues that, who knows? He could be gone next year, next day, who knows? But he really does not take good care of himself. Well, who's he got to take over when he's gone? You never see anybody. Nobody's ever featured in any events, so who knows who the, second level below him are,
Yeah, it will be interesting to see when David Miscavige is finally toppled, whether that be legally through lawsuits and going to prison, or whether that be through death or illness, or for whatever reason, whatever the circumstance. It will be fascinating to see what happens, at upper level management as a response. But Mark, thank you so much for this. This has been amazing. Is there anything else that you want to bring up or say before we wrap off? I think I'd love to have you back for a third part and keep this going.
Absolutely.
If you're up to that.
No, I love talking about this. I usually moderate the discussions on my channel, so I don't ever really always get to give my opinion and my stories. So I appreciate you doing this, Alex. And then also, please subscribe to Alex's channel and also to my channel too. It helps us get the word out. That's what the subscription is for. It's not for us to make a ton of money or anything like that. It's to get the YouTube algorithm to feature our videos to people who may not even know about the abuses in Scientology. So please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It all helps.
Absolutely. If you want to support financially, I think we both got Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal,
buy us a
that
coffee.
Sort of stuff. That helps us, but the best way is engagement. So like, comment, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. It helps us out. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Mark. And I'm looking forward to part 3 already. And I have to sign this off in the same way.
Absolutely.
I like to sign all of these off, which is I'm on war footing and I'm not fucking about.